to help women move forward in addressing real-time issues of the day. And over the past 100 years, there have been many, and there has been tremendous progress along the way, noting that there's still progress to be made. Today, we are addressing break the bias. What a cool topic to talk about in this day and age, because the reality of the world and the reality of where we are today, there are unconscious biases that everyone has. So we're going to ask you to challenge yourselves to think about, if I have a bias, an unconscious bias, what does that look like? How do I address it? And even a bolder ask that we have from our community here at Bloom is, when you see a bias happening that's unconscious, speak up, step in, be bold. This is a part of the Bloom culture. The Bloom culture actually celebrates inclusivity and diversity of all cultures and genders. And we take pride in the tapestry and the various cultures of our organization. It's just a part of our DNA. So as we think about, and as you listen to this amazing panel that this team has pulled together, we want you to be bold, ask the tough questions, and open your mind to enjoy a conversation, which is often sensitive. Let's face it, these are sensitive topics that should be addressed publicly. And we're very proud to have a panel that's going to talk about breaking the bias in the workplace that we serve daily and the workplace that we'll continue to enhance in Bloom, which is ultimately our goal because it ties to the business. So with that said, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Cassie Bounier and have her introduce the panel. Cassie, over to you.
Thank you, Sonja. As Sonja mentioned, I'm Cassie Bonneau. I'm part of the finance organization here at Bloom Energy and have been a strong advocate for diversity in the workplace, as well as specifically supporting women in their career. I'm honored today and excited to have this opportunity to moderate the panel to discuss an extremely important and relevant topic today on International Women's Day. Today, I'm joined by 4 very dynamic leaders here to discuss the topic, breaking the bias. All 4 of our panelists have diverse and unique backgrounds. First of all, thank you for taking your time out of your extremely busy schedules to join this time for us. I'd like to start with each of you introducing yourselves and then giving a little overview of your background, and then tell us why you agreed to speak on this topic and be part of this panel. Arent, let's start with you.
Thanks, Cassie, and thanks for inviting me to be part of this panel. I'm honored to be here. My name is Arent Lavanino. I'm Senior Director for Services Business Management. I work on increasing the revenue and profitability of our services business. I have about 27 years in high tech, most of it at Hewlett-Packard and some time at some tech startups. I also taught high school for about 5 years too, so quite a range of experiences in my life. I'm honored to be on this panel because I see bias as something unconscious or consciously that creates blind spots, which means that we as a company, we miss out on opportunities and we miss identifying risk by having it in our workplace. It does matter how we work together. It affects what we can accomplish together. Thanks for letting me be here.
Thank you. All right, Ron, let's go to you next.
Hey. Thank you, Cassie. Thanks, Arent, for the introduction. I guess that my background is almost 3 decades of working in different industries, wearing multiple hats, all the way from software, engineering. I've even done some consulting work, and I've lived in different parts of the country as well. I mean, of course, I came here to the US for graduate school in '82, went to grad school at Ohio State. I'm a proud Buckeye, and worked in the Midwest for a few years, and moved down south to Texas for about another 7 years, and then moved into the Bay Area in about 2005. one of the people who've been here with this product for a long period of time. And for me, this the reason I agreed to be on this panel was that I looked at the list and it said the only person, a man, amongst the list of panelists. It's like, what an honor it is to be invited to be among these dynamic women. And the whole Break the Bias is special to me is because I think the sum of parts is much bigger than the parts themselves. When you bring in different viewpoints, different cultures, I think we grow not only as people, but also we have a bigger impact on the community and the world as a whole. Because I don't look at the company any different from the community. The whole thing is a blend of all of these pieces. So it's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you for representing the men in this conversation. Cornelia, can we go to you and just again give us a little overview of your background and then why you've decided to be part of this panel?
Thank you very much. For more than 30 years being in technology, and for more than half of that time in leadership roles and in various companies. So that's just it as a base for bias, because when I started in technology, there wasn't a lot of females in in those roles. So an incredible area where I've always been able to participate in women in leadership or women in the companies or International Women's Day. So why is it special for me to be here today? And there's really 3 reasons, right? So I've got 2 amazing daughters, and they are my pride and joy. And to everyone here, in September, I'm going to be a grandma. I think there is just nothing as wonderful as that. But with that is, I'm the champion. I'm the role model, right? It starts at home, and it goes to my family, and making sure that they also know that they can go and be the best that they want to be in life. The next one is, I usually take this time of year to do a good reflection, that I lose touch. Is there something I need to do differently? Am I connecting to my values? So it's a very important time for me in the year is the week of International Women's Day, because you just get that focus. And I've been privileged to be part of panels, and it gives me that time for reflection. And then the last one is my passion, right? Over the years, I've reached, in my opinion, my Everest, right? So what is it that I want to do with all of that? Is I just have a passion, and that is to help people to be the best self they can be, right? And that's just it, right? And so I'm incredibly privileged to be here today, and before I'm 1 year in Bloom, be able to participate in something around women in Bloom as well. So thank you for the invitation.
Awesome. Thank you, Cornelia. And then our last panelist, we are lucky enough actually to have a local celebrity from the San Jose Sharks. So Neda, if you can give us a little bit of your background and why you decided to be part of the panel.
Sure, thank you so much for having me. It's absolutely an honor to be here, and it's going to be very difficult to follow Cornelia. I'm Neda Tabatabaie. I'm the VP of Business Analytics and Technology with the Sharks. You are one of our partners, and I'm absolutely, again, honored to be here. I started in the sports industry in 2005 in Toronto. That's where I'm from. Before that, I was in retail, so it was sort of very huge change in industry, just culturally, everything you want to imagine. I started also in the data role in the sports industry in 2005, which wasn't really a thing at the time. Of course, I'm on the business side, but sports industry has been very old school all the time. So use of data at the time was not a thing in the business side. Hopefully we've grown a lot, fast forward after 9 years at the organization that I worked for in Toronto, I moved to New York to be sort of on the other side, on the tech vendor that worked for sports organization. And then 6 years ago, I joined the Sharks. So I've been here for 6 years. I lead our business analytics and technology team. And our role is to help the business departments, everybody, regardless of what your role is, make better decisions based on data and technology. So how are we enabling you to do what you need to do better, faster, more efficient? I said yes to this, as Cornelia mentioned, this is also a passion of mine. being in an industry that doesn't necessarily have a lot of women, although again, we've grown a lot in the past few years. But when you combine sports, technology, and Silicon Valley, it is not, people like me are not very common. And I think also when you think of hockey, you don't think of somebody like me. I'm an immigrant to Canada and then to the US. I was born in Iran. I didn't even know what hockey was till I was 20. So I think, every time it's not the most comfortable situation for me to talk about myself at all, or talk about my experience, or even provide recommendations for people. But anytime I do that, I hear such great feedback of, I didn't know somebody like you exists in the sports industry, or you have an accent. I also have an accent, right? So I think it's important to represent and sort of show there are many, many different people in many different industries that might not be the stereotype of what you think of an industry.
Yeah, awesome. Well, let's get into it. I'm really excited, especially even just hearing your 4 backgrounds, all really different, and obviously all extremely passionate about this topic. So let's get started. So Cornelia, I'm going to start with you. And again, this should just be kind of conversational. So what bias have you experienced and what did you do about it?
Yeah, fantastic question. And one of those that took me way, way back in the beginning. Right. And I always reflect to one particular meeting where I a lot of biases out there, accent, education, all kinds of things, gender, etc. But the one thing that was very stark for me, I walked into a room where we were doing a merger and acquisition, and man after man walked in there with their black suits, and I count them 30. I was the only one that dressed somewhat different. And also there was absolutely no other woman there, which was very interesting. And I felt very intimidated. And that was the first time that as a leader, I actually felt a strong stirring, right? So I always go back to that moment when I feel that. And then I started to understand, okay, I need to do 1 or 2 things. If I want to be heard, I have to also do something to be heard. I can't just expect others to do something. So I build alliances. I go find a man like Rom and say, listen, if we're in a meeting and I've got a point, I must make this point in this meeting. Can you look out for me? Create the space for me. So if I have something, or at least raise your hand and say, I agree with you. That's if you agree with me, but I'll determine that before the meeting, right? But I build alliances that could help me break into the meeting or into the audience that I can actually feel comfortable to share what I want to share. So that was one. But as I started with that, I realized when my voice grew bigger in the organization that I had the voice to actually create space for others. And at first it started with women. And then I realized there's others sitting around the table that doesn't conform to what we think is the ideal person that has, an opinion that we all have to latch on to. So how do I create and use my voice, create that space for others to say something? So I go into meetings, especially the ones that matter, right? Is go in and observe the room or the conference, see who's quiet, know the people that have good ideas, create a space for them, ask their opinion. And one of my favorites is, when people get talked over. All of us experience this where you voice something at a table, nobody latch onto it or even give you or mind you if you want, and then somebody else will say it and it's the best idea ever. I think we all experience that. I love at that point to say it's exactly the same thing that Sally said and I think it's a great idea. Hey Sally, do you want to elaborate? So you bring it back, help people in a nice way to realize that the idea did start there, and let's support the person that actually put the idea on the table. So create subtle things in the room that brings that inclusion in. And that was what Sonja mentioned, right? So that is what we as leaders can do, but that's also something we can model. But it takes a bit of courage, I have to say. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Cassie.
Yeah, I love just how intentional you are with that. Like it takes planning and it takes, like I said, courage and being really intentional on breaking that bias. Let's go to Arent.
Sure. Yeah. So as I reflected on all the ways to answer this question, I want to share a really positive experience for me at HP. I was fortunate to be part of a mentor circle where a group of women leaders, we were lined up with senior vice presidents and EVPs as our mentors for like a 9-month process. And we had a lot of group discussions over that 9 months about, what prevented them from being able to champion women in leadership, or what did they need to be able to support women in leadership. And some really interesting conversations. One conversation was around the fact that most of them were men, and that they did not necessarily feel comfortable having one-on-ones with someone of a different gender. Imagine not being able to talk to your boss. Could be a career limiter. So we spent a lot of time talking about how do you create safe spaces for both parties. We talked a lot about how the after work side of work can be detrimental for women. Women still statistically do most of the home responsibilities. And so when you're asking them to be at a dinner or out to golf or something like that, it's taking a higher toll. So we started talking about how do we create networking events during the day, when it's easier for women to attend. We talked about travel. We talked about not every meeting needs to start at 7 or 8 a.m. on Monday. That sometimes that has to happen. There are business reasons why it has to happen, but not always. So can you mix it up a bit? And by the way, that's good for everybody, because men don't need to be away from their families on Sunday either, right? A really good set of conversations around how can we collectively work together to create an environment where people can thrive, and where people can contribute in the way, in what works best, for them, and how they can give even more to the company as a result of that. So I just appreciated that experience, and I felt like it created change for the company.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how we continue to evolve. I think especially the past 2 years, as everybody's lives have kind of changed through working from home and COVID, that it's kind of created, I think, a little bit more of that balance, hopefully. All right, Ram, we go to you.
I think I contemplated on this. I think that as an immigrant coming into this country, and I've lived in different parts of the country, even in grad school in Ohio, once you leave the bigger city and get into the smaller cities, you can definitely see the experience of bias. You walk into a restaurant and all eyes are on you. Or you go to the restroom, somebody speaks to you very slowly English. Do you speak English? It's as if you don't know the language just because you speak a little slower. So you experience these kinds of things. But I think that for me, as I got into the workplace, I noticed that there were more people who were supportive rather than people who were against. And like Cornelia said, most of the times, I think I had to reflect back upon myself, what fears do I have? What biases do I have? And how is it that I can make a connection? And I've always found that making a personal connection always breaks a bias. It's not that people are intentional in terms of their bias. And like Sonja was saying, it is unconscious because they haven't met somebody like you before. So if you can talk to them at a personal level about the families, there are things that are outside of work and you make that bridge of the connection, I think the bias drops down. Yeah. So that's the way I've typically managed it in my career. Every time I've felt it, I've gone back and look at, where do my fears and, insecurities come from? Address those. And once you address it, and it's kind of like the world is a reflection of you. The less you have biases, the more you run into people who have less bias. Of course, there will always be those extremes that you would run into. But like Cornelia said, there is actually more people on the right side of the plane than less. Yeah. That's what I've been noticing. But interestingly, even with my kids, I have noticed that I've had certain unconscious biases. When my daughter was starting her career, I so badly wanted her to be in engineering because there were not enough strong, powerful women in engineering. So I kept asking her to move into engineering because as an engineer, I think that's the best thing to do, right? But I never asked her what is it that she wanted to do, right? But the fiercely independent girl that she was like, no, Dad, that's not happening. And today she's very successful in what she does. And she did a master's in public policy. She does much more impactful work than if she had been an engineer, I think, So I think sometimes you have your own unconscious biases and you learn from that. And then you move from that as well.
I love your point on just having to look inside of yourself, which can be obviously hard to do. But I think you bring up some really great points, like can't change unless you understand what's happening inside of you. So thank you for that. Neda, you can just talk a little bit about the biases you've experienced and what did you do about it?
As I was mentioning, sports industry has had its own issues in many different levels, and of course, similar to other industries, right? I was very lucky when I started in the sports industry. I have very strong role model, female role model and male role models that really got me and helped me grow. But there was always maybe, you hear about all the stories, you read about all the stories about, real discrimination cases. Thankfully, of course, I never experienced anything like that. But, there's sometimes the microaggressions that you experience, right? Or the certain phrases that are used to refer to women, she's aggressive, you need to be softer. Of course, everybody has a growth area, right? But if you help a woman the same way you might help a man to channel their energy or their growth areas without going to the stereotypes, I think that's really, for me at least, that was really helpful. And I think as you grow yourself, then you perhaps notice different things that you might be able to address. And then also calling out your own biases is also really important. I think for me, one of the things that I continue to do is to try to learn, and not only about myself, but about just listening about not only if you hear something from a leader and you don't like it, then try not to be like that person. And honestly, so maybe it's a reverse role model, but there are cases that even with women leaders that I was like, I don't want to be like that. So I try my best not to be like that. And as you grow, then you can support everybody else to do that. The other thing that you continue to face, whether it's within your organization, at least in my experience, or within the industry, again, there are many cases that I had to prove and work a lot harder of what my expertise are. Many times I was the only woman in the room when you talk about data, business analytics in the sports industry. And, once you build those relationships, which everybody, Cornelia and Ram mentioned, then it was very different, that I was looked at because of my expertise, not like, what is she doing here? What does she know? But there were many, many different cases. And sometimes still to this day, I face that of, it is not expected of you to step into the room and know your work, whether it's technology or analytics. You looked at first and then listen to. But after, now a lot of people know me, so that has changed a lot. And hopefully I can help somebody else coming up the ladder to not have the same experience.
Awesome. Yeah, I think one point that you made in the beginning that was really interesting for me is how words matter, right? So simple words that, could be microaggressions and things like that, really important to just be aware of how we talk to people, how people talk to us. All right, so we talked a little bit about personal experiences. So I'd like to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about in a corporate environment. So what did you do to break the bias in corporate America, or in your case, Neda, in the sports world? So let's start with Ram on this one. If you can.
I think the corporate environment, I think it is a question of, like as Sonja was saying, if you see something, say something. And that's what I do. I think Neda was right. There is a bias against women who are very career oriented and we are, really want to move up. If a man does it, it's considered to be okay. But if a woman does it, she's just too aggressive. There is that stereotypical feeling that, women have to be a little bit different in their careers. how they approach their things. But I think for me, whenever I observe it, I just have a conversation right there. I mean, either in the meeting, if somebody says, well, I'm not sure if we can consider this woman for a role, because what if she gets married and she has a child, right? And it's amazing that even today, it's every once in a while it does come up. And you have to bring it up and say, you can't really put that into the equation. So I think it is pointing those kinds of things out. And if it does persist, to have a one-on-one directly with the people and address it, right then and there. So that's typically the way I have approached it.
That's great. Yeah, and I think not only having strong women in leadership roles, but strong men who are willing to stand up for women in leadership roles is really, really important. So thank you for that comment. Right. Neda? Oh, go ahead, Cornelia. Yep.
Well, I just want to say I'll tie a little bit in with what Ram got there. So personal experience is also first thinking about bias being just a woman, right? And then in the corporate environment, you start to realize, and with all this efforts that we do, is I create my own biases. And I think I told some of the other panelists, I looked at women that's wearing high heels and I go like, why are you doing that to yourself? But it created more and more things will say, who are you trying to impress? And at some point I go like, I'm creating my own bias here on something about shoes, right? And how I'm judging people on shoes. And I ended up, Sonja, you love high heels, and I actually now appreciate the beautiful shoes you're wearing and go like, man, that's awesome. But I recognize that I was creating my own biases. And I say sorry a lot, right? I have to really confess. And then I realized, why am I saying sorry? Because we have all this unconscious bias is now a word, but we never, or lots of people don't intentionally say something to hurt somebody else, or they create an environment that hurts someone else. But I started then to walk on eggshells and go like, I'd rather not say something. I'd rather not do something, because what if that doesn't get, misconstrued? And then I can't live my life like that, right? So what do I change? And I changed the focus, especially not just in the company and corporate, but more in corporate because I'm here a lot. But any engagement is, how do I help the other person succeed? And when I started that thought process, I find myself seeing the person, not the bias, not the preconceived notion, not the paradigm you want to plaster on people. Even when I pick up the phone to a call center because something is not right on your invoice, or you didn't get the right package, I'm angry. I just want to say, why did you do this? Da, 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 da. I'll start now with, how does two of us see if we can actually resolve this issue? Putting me in a place where I don't judge the accent on the other side. I don't judge the person showing in the door. And when somebody walk in, it's how, in every conversation, that's hard, but in every conversation, have the conversation, how do I help you succeed? And that is, it became my North Star a little bit, not to fall into my own biases, because I felt myself creating these things, and I'm not thinking about, it's always what's coming to me because I am a woman, but what am I putting out there? How do I react to it? So in the corporate is every conversation of somebody coming in is how I'm going to help that person to succeed today. Being that is the focus, you become a little bit more true, a little more pure in your actions. I say sorry a lot less now.
I think to add to what Cornelia was saying, I read this recent book called Radical Candor. Really an amazing book on conversations. How do you have conversations? And when you come from this point of view of caring for that person, then the bias breaking easily happens, because you don't change if the person in front of you doesn't care about you, right? So I think that is a key, is dropping your own judgment and showing that you care for that person, for their growth, then the bias will drop. It's not a question of what you're doing is wrong, don't do it, but it's more of a question of it's going to hurt you.
Well, maybe I'll add in more of a tactical side to this. It's natural, unconscious bias becomes a natural part of, of what you learn to do and how you learn to face the world. And a lot of times that comes across as, follow your gut or your instinct. And in the corporate world, I find that that's where we can do something different that would be helpful, rather than follow your gut or follow your instinct. Sometimes that can have behind it an unconscious bias. It's important to reach out to create diversity and inclusion in your teams, whether that's a hiring team or an innovation session, or a project lead or something like that. I remember distinctly, about 10 or 15 years ago, I was hiring a manager, a people manager. I had a team of about 4 or 5 that were interviewing, and we had a very cohesive, really fun team. We really got along well, and we really had a good time together, working together. And so when we got together as a panel, we had 2 candidates at the end that we really liked, and we were comparing them. And the conversation came up that one is like cool water and the other one was like hot fire. And the question I put to the panel is, what do we need right now on our team? What do we have and what do we need? And we all said, well, we're all cool water. We should hire the cool water person. It will work out great. And I said, wait a minute. And we did end up hiring the hot fire, and there were some fireworks at times, but it was the right decision. It shook us up, it challenged us, it made us look at things differently. And that exercise of letting yourself being pushed, letting yourself be uncomfortable, that's really important in trying to get your hands around your own unconscious bias.
Just to build on that, in our organization, we call it diversity, inclusion, and belonging, because you can hire diverse people, you can make them feel like they're included, but do they really feel like they belong? Even when it comes to myself, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. There's just a lot more work that goes into that. You really, really, really need to be intentional about it. You got to really listen to people. And one of the things I try to do, and I started this a couple of years ago, was actually sometimes you got to check yourself. Right? Am I, just going back to what everybody said, just, really learn about your biases. And it's, when something, and all of us do that, something that comes to your head, and then I'm these days try to step back and be like, would I think that or say that about a male, a female, whatever that might be, right? So I think those are really important. Sometimes the answer is no, you wouldn't. So don't think about it about this other person. Or sometimes the answer is yes, you would, right? So you just got to see where the background of that is. One of the things I heard a few years ago, and I can't remember who it was, definitely not my quote, but one of the things I learned was, once you make it to the table, set a table for somebody else. Mm-hmm. And I think that is huge, especially if you're in an organization that may be at a leadership level, or even in different, most cases, there are more people junior to you. Are you bringing somebody else with you? If you're in a meeting, as everybody mentioned, or if somebody's getting talked over, are you calling them out? And, everybody can do that. I can do that. And one of my colleagues of another gender can do that. So that's just just a little tactical things that you all can do. And then just supporting each other, I think, is really important to do that. But I just absolutely love what everybody was saying. It's lots of great takeaways.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. I think especially that last quote, like, once you make it to the table, make a place, help bring along other people with you, which I think is so powerful. And that's how we change culture, right? So I think all these, really great ideas, practical things that we can all do. So now reflecting back, I think we've talked a little bit about your personal journeys, your professional journeys. Can you just talk to us a little bit about what you've learned through this? Let's go ahead and start with Cornelia.
As I said, I say sorry a lot. One of the things that I learned, and I'm back to my household, right? There were some things on TV that I asked my children not to watch, and I even asked my husband not to watch. Comedy, especially in America, is at the expense of others. And it is so contradictory as to what we're trying to put into the world. If we don't like the conversation, let's humiliate the person, right? If we don't like the debate, let's pull the person apart. That's exactly what we're trying to reverse in the universe. So in the corporate environment, we're fighting this all day long as give space, create space, be diverse, be inclusive, all the beautiful things Sonja said. But yet, when we go sit on our couches in front of TV, we sit and laugh where it's at the expense of others. And now, sorry for anyone that loved The Simpsons, but there is a very good example, right? Everybody laugh at it. It's all at the expense of others. It's either because they look different, or they talk different, or they think different, and we will attack the person relentlessly. When we see that in our corporate environment, use that again as a place where I practice not to do that, create that space. And let's not fill ourselves with the garbage that the world keep on throwing into us where we attack the person. So there's so much of that in the world. And unfortunately, it is in our social environments so full of that, where we just literally, I don't agree with you, look at the violence in the country, sorry for the podium. But it is all about that. I don't like what you say, and therefore I'm going to hurt you, harm you, go personal. Can we create a forum again where we can have a good debate, come up with the right solutions, create a safe environment in our office where we don't attack the person or alienate a team member because they have a different idea? So it's these two polar things, and I get goosebumps even thinking about it, but we also should think about what do we fill ourselves with? You know, what are we laughing at? What's our entertainment? And certainly humiliation of other people should not be it. So look around and see, what are you watching? What are you participating in? And we can't be two people. We're one person, right? So we have to watch all of the sides and see if we can create an environment where we pay it forward a little bit to others, is to watch out for that, because that's how we create a better society, not just in the corporate world. But that was a little bit of an epiphany I had, and try to be better myself with what garbage I'm filling myself with.
Yeah, I think my learning on this journey, particularly in the last couple of years with a lot of the dialogue that we've had in the United States, you know, around inclusion and rights for different groups of people, is that things aren't going to change on their own. Things inside of me are not going to change on their own. That I have to create the relationships around me, the space for people to be open and to tell me when I screw up. You know, a lot of times I can tell when I say the wrong thing and I see a grimace, and you know, and it's like, oh, I need to find out more about that. I need to go understand what's behind that grimace. Or sometimes I recognize it and I'm like, oh yeah, I said the wrong thing there. But it's for all of us, we're not going to get there just by writing it out. You have to really look at, how are you thinking about things? How are you seeing things? How many points of view have you taken into account? Whose interest have you protected or empowered, and then learn from it and grow from it. You know, and I guess I would just say I'm grateful for the people in my life who do speak up, or who do know that when I screw up, but still, you know, still give me grace, and still, you know, still interface with me in a very kind way, and help me along in that journey. So, you know, I would wish for everyone that they have people around them that help them along in that journey.
To add to that, I think one of the things that I learn and continue to learn is that not everybody's like me, right? I might be thinking a certain way. I'm, for example, very logical. I'm logical driven. Not everybody's like that. A lot of people are more emotionally driven. So just knowing that, and just understanding that just because I react a certain way to something doesn't mean everybody else should react the same way. That to me has been key just for my own growth, you know. And then one of the things, as everybody else mentioned, is just continue to learn. There is so much to learn about everything. And it's just important sometimes to just acknowledge that, hey, this is a topic I don't know enough about. Can you educate me? Or what are the resources I can go to educate myself? We've been, not only as a person, but as an organization, we've been trying to do that more and more. We have an internal media club that we just sit and discuss different pieces of, you know, content. Even sometimes, you know, social media has its benefits and disadvantages, but there is a lot of great people sharing their experiences, sharing their background, educational material, whatever it might be on social media that you can learn from. But I think just continuing to just have that curious mindset, especially when it comes to topics like this, and just acknowledging that I'm a woman, but I don't know every woman's experience. I had a certain experience doesn't mean everybody else had that experience. Or I work in hockey, not everybody has the same experience, or everybody in this group has different experiences. Just knowing that and being a little bit maybe intentional about what you do, what you say, who you include in different things can make a huge difference. And again, I don't do it right all the time. I do my best to do the best that I can, but you just, as long as you keep on maybe taking positive steps one after another, we're all going to be better off.
But what I think that what I've learned over time is that the new generation is a lot more inclusive, much more informed. And I'm really amazed, both talking to my kids and as well as many of the younger people who reach out. I'm just amazed at how intelligent they are and how inclusive they are. So I think that one of the things as a company, as well as we can do, is include more of the younger people into the decision making, into their ideas and thoughts. And I think that can really bring the change about much faster, because I'm just amazed constantly, how creative, and I don't know, call it the information age or whatever, they are a lot more exposed and they have a lot broader understanding than even the way that I was brought up. So I think that's been one of my key learnings for me, is that listen to younger people more. I think that will really help you get to where you want to go.
Yeah, I love that. I love that point. I think we have so many great resources at our fingertips with, young people in the company and our children that, we should really leverage them. I really loved hearing just how we're in a constant state of learning and adjusting as we become more intentional with our thoughts and becoming aware of our biases. So I'm sure with all these great panelists that we have sparked some questions from the audience. So we have about 15 minutes left. So Allison, if you can help read the questions that are coming into you for our panelists, that would be great.
Absolutely. So thanks, everyone. If you could just pop your questions into the chat box or in the Q&A, we'll get to as many as we can. Cornelia, I'd like to direct this first one to you. So breaking biases and challenging stereotypes can often be an uncomfortable experience. How do you think that we can create an environment where people feel empowered to speak up?
And again, a role modeling, right? A role modeling is that when somebody actually see what you do to create that space, where you actually pause someone for a second and say, let's hear somebody else, right? So role modeling is probably for us as leaders, the biggest way to show that if we have courage, others will also go, and in the next meeting where you're not in, they'll go, let me try, right? Let me try that. So it's incredibly important to see the role models and how they do it. So we have to walk the talk. And it's amazing when you are a leader, sometimes people will tell me where they saw me or watched me or observed me, and I go, I had no idea. So when you make the choice to be a leader, then you know that you're going to impact people, and that is a responsibility that comes, right? So model that, let them see it, let them see we're not just talking about breaking the bias, but we are breaking the bias in many ways. Getting that engineer that's more quiet opportunity by handing them a pen and say, how share your ideas. Someone will see that. And then when you do observe where somebody actually stepped all over somebody else, afterwards, create that courage and then go and change the conversation with that person. And then I guarantee you, will not be thinking about the next meeting differently, but they again may teach or show, right? So it's absolutely that walking the talk is the thing that we have to do every single day. So that creates the space.
Great, thanks, Cornelia. And that kind of dovetails into one of the questions that we have in the chat box. And Ram, I'd like to direct this one over to you. How do you cope with individuals who are maybe unwilling to recognize or don't recognize their own unconscious biases, or maybe are even exercising conscious bias? How do you work with those people in a team or acquaintances?
I think the unconscious bias is a little bit easier than the conscious bias. So unconscious bias, I think I go back to the same learnings that I had from reading Radical Candor, is how do you approach this from the point of view of caring for that person? If you come from the point of view that, hey, this is going to hurt your career, and here's the things that you're doing unconsciously, and if you bring it to their awareness, everybody wants to grow, and everybody wants to grow in their career, and everybody wants to do the right things. So if you bring that up, then that's okay. The conscious bias one is a little bit more challenging. I think maybe that's a place where you send them to Sonja. we need to look into some training programs that are there to be able to really bring that in and again, bring it to their awareness. And, so I don't know if anyone else has got a better answer.
Yeah, I would just jump in to say that when I've tried to take that head on in the past, a tool I found effective is to talk about, the either the hurt or the opportunity missed by the conscious bias and how it impacted both people and the business, and that how that was not where we were headed from a values perspective and from an impact perspective that we wanted to have, in the workplace and in the industry. And sometimes that's enough, right? Sometimes people don't realize how their actions, they think their actions are small or in a corner, and they don't realize how impactful they can be, and the choice that they're making, with that impact.
Thanks, Ian. Sonja, since you're here, I'd like to direct this one to you from a Bloom perspective. How do you create more inclusion and diversity when most of the time a company is looking for someone who fits in the culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for sending it my way. I'll answer it this way. Look, Bloom has a very distinct culture that we are very proud of. And we talk about the culture in this way. It's about being collaborative, inclusive, results-oriented, and respectful. And those traits exist in every culture and in every gender. So, you don't eliminate, it's impossible to eliminate when an individual brings those characteristics into our culture. Because you have to have some standard in which you want to continue to reinforce the environment that's created for your employees. So, when we talk about the culture and our value system, it is a very inclusive model, which actually enhances our ability to attract very talented and diverse candidates from every discipline in the world and every gender. So it is not exclusive in any way, shape, or form, or eliminates based on any particular bias. So hopefully that answers the question. If not, you guys can come on up to my office and we can chat about it. So
that's great. Thanks, Sonja. So our next one is around advice. So what advice you would give to aspiring female leaders facing this generation's challenges and biases, which are not necessarily direct or overt, but maybe more subtle, politically correct? Maybe I'd like everybody to kind of think about that advice, but maybe Neda, if we could start with you.
Sure. Advice, I would say, know your strengths, right? Know your strengths, know where you need to learn and get better at, but also network and create that group of people that can be your peers, can be more senior, but sort of, I heard it referred to as your boardroom. Like, who are the people that can support you, help you, give you honest feedback, and then help you grow? One of the best things you can have is somebody that would give it to you straight, not sugar-coated, and just really give you that honest feel. Talk about radical candor, right? Give you that honest feedback that you need. And I've had that many times. There were many times that I was like struggling, oh, why should I change? Why this, why that? But then you just really need to get that direct feedback from you and then be open to it, right? Of course, not every feedback might be the right feedback for you, but if you get the right people in the room, the people that you trust, and of course respect, I think that's one of the best ways. And one of the best things that had helped me in my career, especially in this industry, is network. I've built from early on, I built a huge network and great people in our industry. We are friends, and just having that, whether it's a tactical analytics related project or something about, hey, I'm going to, Sharks gave me a job offer. Should I take that job? What do you know about the culture? Just knowing the people that are there and have your best interest in mind are going to give you the right feedback is going to be huge. And not all the time you got to like what they're going to say, right? So just be ready for that.
Yeah, that was, Neda nailed it. But I would also say, I think for women, particularly young women, women of any age, sometimes you tend to second guess yourself in a situation about what is going on here. What do I need to do? How do I need to show up? Do I need to stand my ground? Do I need to be loud? Do I need to be quiet? All those kinds of questions. And definitely that board of directors concept, your own personal board of directors, can help you work through those situations, to think through them. I would say that don't let other people's problems or biases limit you. Define yourself and where you want to go, and work through the situations you find yourself in. And at some point when you make changes where you need to, but don't let other people's limitations limit you. Be willing to be the strong leader that you want to grow into.
I would love to follow on the advice part, right? Because it's and beautiful. And by the way, Neda, set a table for someone else. I'm going to go write that on the top of my whiteboard, because I absolutely so love that, because that just in one beautiful new sentence is just, honing it. And the advice that I would give is find a mentor. And I'll say it again, find a mentor, and then privileged to then at one day you'll become a mentor. But finding a mentorship actually unlocked my career because there was somebody that actually was what Ram said, cared. It was some lady that cared about me. She said, you are worth more than what we see here. You're worth more than what you're doing. You are worth more than what you think you are, right? She just believed in way more than I would ever think I could be. And just that belief was amazing to just kind of start to make the wheels turn of what is the ceiling or the glass ceiling I put above myself, not others put above, right? And then mentorship just unlocked so much, but that becomes the safe place. That becomes the person that can watch out for you. So if you don't have a mentor, find a mentor and be intentional about the mentorship and what you want out of that. But that's a wonderful way to actually tie into it, to see how you can also forge your career in a world that now has and show the light on many other biases other than women in the workplace.
I think that everyone said it. I would just add one more, saying that we have a tendency to, doubt our capabilities, and whether it's men or women, but we never doubt our incapabilities. We always think that there are things that we can't do well, but I think you need to switch that around. Every day you got to ask yourself, what more can I do? Things that you think that you cannot do, step into it and give that a shot. You might be surprised how much more your potential is than what you think it is. So that's the only other thing that I would add, besides those great suggestions from everyone.
I think we have time for one more quick question.
Sure. So I'd like to end this by kind of posing a question to you all and to everyone watching is, how do we bring this beyond just one day? So International Women's Day is fantastic. It's just one day. How do we make sure we're having these conversations in the other 364 days of the year?
Actually, it's an interesting question because my wife was livid. She said, why just one day for International Women's Day? Does it mean the 364 days are not Women's Days? It's like, it's very true. I mean, I know that it highlights the importance, it brings the attention, but I think that we do have to take that as every day, not just one day.
100%. I would say practice it every day. Each of us does something every day that is just not just one day, support your colleagues, lift other women, support women's sports, like anything it is that you can do, even small ways. Don't use words if you have kids, whether girls or boys. That is, again, goes back to the stereotypes. Make sure they can participate in sports, whatever it might be, just practice something every day.
And for sure, every day gives us opportunities. What we do with those opportunities is up to us, right? And if we are conscious about all these things, we will see those opportunities and don't let it pass. It never comes again. So we all have to look for those interactions, and every single day as soon as you open your mouth, you have an ability to do something positive or not. So all those opportunities we have to look at and see how do we further not just International Women's Day, but actually use the forum to actually show a light on many other things as well. So it's again such an honor and a privilege to be able to sit here and just celebrate how far we've came, and now the frontier is slightly bigger.
I would encourage adding reflection to your daily practice, reflection for yourself and reflection among your teams on how you do things, how you do work, how you are in the world. That helps to raise awareness, and it's that awareness that allows us to create change.
Awesome. Well, I leave this conversation, I think, really one word, hope. So I feel like we really are part of a culture change and shift that's happening. I want to thank Bloom Energy for encouraging and creating the space to have these conversations, the Bloom Energy Women's Leadership Organization, and the executive team for sponsoring and being so supportive of International Women's Day and breaking the bias. A special thank you to our panelists. Thank you for being vulnerable and honest with us. And the first steps in breaking the bias is identifying our biases and committing to working towards a more inclusive and accepting world. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.